What happens when a simple "don't call, I'm busy at work" text is sent from the wrong bed? How does a husband go from humiliated and quiet to standing next to his wife's boss's wife while legal papers land in public? Can a woman who swears she was just chasing success still claim she's the victim when the revenge is calm and lawful? My name is Yanthi Mora, and I still do not feel like the bad one in this story. I know people will say I ruined everything. They will say I broke my family on purpose and that I am selfish. Maybe they are right in some ways, but I also know no one saw what it was like to carry all that dead weight of a safe, boring life. People only see the end, not the small cuts that came before. I was in my boss's bed when I sent that famous text. The sheets were too white and smelled like hotel soap, not like our old washing powder at home. Damien lay beside me, one arm behind his head, watching some muted show on the wall TV. The city lights came in through the big window, and I remember thinking that this room felt more like my life than my own bedroom did. That thought should have scared me, but it made me feel light. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Caleb asking how late I would be at work and if I needed him to keep dinner warm in the oven. He always asked things like that, like some careful nanny. I looked at Damien, rolled my eyes a little, and said in a dry voice that my husband was checking on me again. Damien did not look away from the screen. He just smiled in a lazy way, like it was all a joke. I typed the text fast, with that mix of nerves and excitement that had become normal for me. I told Caleb not to call or text because I was busy at work and deep in a project. I knew the words were cold. I wanted them cold. I wanted him to feel that my world did not move around his needs all the time. I pressed send while I was still half under another man's arm, and I felt strange power in that small movement. Caleb replied quickly, as he always did. I expected another soft question about whether I was eating enough or if the office was safe at night. Instead, my phone showed something that made my chest go tight. His answer did not come in our private thread. It popped up in a small group chat with his name, my name, and another contact. I saw Hannah's profile picture, the neat face of Damien's wife. The message said that he and Hannah would help us with the divorce when we were ready. For a second, I thought it was some bug on the phone or a sick joke. I sat up in bed and read the message 3 times. My heart beat fast, but I also felt annoyed. I told myself he was being dramatic and childish. I like to say he always turned small things into full storms, even when he barely raised his voice. I told myself this was the same thing, just written down. Damien finally took his eyes off the TV and asked what was going on, in that calm, amused way he had. I told him my husband was trying to scare me by bringing his wife into things. I said Caleb was playing smart, but that I would not fall for it. Damien's mouth tightened just a little. He said that whatever was happening was my problem, not his, and that grown adults could handle their home lives. I smiled like it did not hurt, but his distance landed like a stone in my stomach. On the ride home later, I watched the city pass by through the taxi window and built the story in my head. I decided that Caleb had made that group chat to control me, to let me know he was talking to my boss's wife, to push shame on me. I told myself it was emotional abuse, even if he never yelled or hit anything. If he had just trusted me, if he had given me space to grow, none of this needed to happen. That was the story I held on to while I climbed the stairs up to our apartment. When I walked into our bedroom, Caleb was sitting on his side of the bed, already changed into a soft t-shirt and worn shorts. My half of the room was messy, with clothes draped over a chair and my work bag lying open. He asked how late I had stayed at the office. I told him I had been stuck in a client call and then finishing a report with the team. He said that my text had sounded firm, like I did not want him to contact me at all. I laughed and told him he was reading too much into one message. He did not argue. He just watched me in that quiet way that always made me feel judged. It annoyed me more than shouting ever could. He placed his mug down on the nightstand, far from where I tossed my bag, like even our cups needed space from each other. I thought he was being cold and strange. In my head, I said respect follows results, And I had results while he only had worries. Mila was already asleep in her room, and I peeked in on her, partly to avoid more talk. She lay curled around her stuffed rabbit, hair on the pillow like a small, dark cloud. For a moment I did feel something like guilt, but I pushed it down. I told myself that if I reached a higher role at work, Mila would thank me one day. She would not remember these small, tense nights. That is what I believed then, or what I chose to believe. After brushing my teeth, I walked down the short hall and saw light from the study. Caleb was at the small desk we had squeezed against the wall. His laptop screen showed a grid, a spreadsheet with rows of dates and small notes. When I came closer, he minimized it. He said he was just sorting some things so he would not forget bills and appointments. I told him he was becoming obsessive and joked that maybe he needed a hobby that was not worrying. On the shelf above him, I noticed a new folder with a neat label that said, Household. It looked thicker than our usual pile of bills. I tapped the spine with my finger and asked if we were turning into those boring couples with files for everything. He only said that it helped him keep the house running. He spoke in a calm voice that made me feel like a child who had broken a rule. I hated that feeling and told myself he was playing the victim. When I turned to leave, our printer, which sat on a low table, gave a short hum and pushed out a single blank page. Caleb stood and pulled it free, checked it, then tossed it aside like it was nothing. His phone, lying face up on the table, lit up silently with a call marked private. He tapped the screen to mute it fully and slipped on his headphones before walking past me. It was strange, but I told myself he was the secretive one now, hiding things from me. We went to bed without more words. The room was dark except for a small glow from his phone as he set a new reminder. I watched his face in the dim light and thought he looked tired, but I still blamed him for that. I told myself he refused to match my pace, so of course he felt old and used up. Even now, I still think, in some small, hard part of me, that he could have fought for me in a different way. Phone screen lit with a new alert labelled Harbour Centre 10:40 a.m. as he closed the household folder and turned off the light. The next morning I woke up before the alarm because light was already pushing through the curtains. Caleb was not in the bed. His side was cool, the sheet pulled tight like no one had slept there. For 1 second I felt a small pang. Then I told myself he had simply gone to his new little routine with his lists and his files. I walked into the kitchen and found him dressed already, work shirt buttoned, making Mila's lunch with slow, careful hands. He asked if I had slept well and if my project was finished. I said the work was hard but important, and that someone in this family had to push forward. He only nodded and slid Mila's lunchbox into her bag. On the fridge, my eye caught a new red circle around a date 2 weeks away, drawn with Caleb's neat pen. Next to it, someone had written, meeting, personal. I asked what that was about. He said he just needed to speak with some people about the future. I said he made it sound like he was planning a funeral, then laughed at my own joke. He did not laugh. He wiped his hands on a towel and told me he would take Mila to school so I could go in early. For a second, I almost thanked him, but then I remembered the group chat message and felt hard again. At the office, the open plan floor hummed with the usual noise, phones ringing and keyboards tapping. I walked in with my coffee chin a little higher than normal. I wanted to look like someone who had options. Marina waved from her desk and rolled her chair closer to mine. She said people had seen a picture of me and Damien from last week's team event and that the comments were wild. She asked if Caleb was bothered by it. I told her he was jealous and a bit controlling and did not understand how close creative teams had to be. I said he had even pulled some dramatic stunt in a group chat, acting like a wounded hero. Marina raised her eyebrows and grinned. She asked exactly what he had said. I told the story in a light voice, saying that I had texted that I was busy at work and that he had replied in a chat with Hannah, offering to help with our divorce. I let my tone make it sound like he was pathetic, like he had tried to scare me but only made himself look small. Marina shook her head and said she could never date a man that sensitive. The woman in the next pod looked over with interest. and I enjoyed the way their faces said, "Poor you," dealing with such a man. Damien came by our row later with a printout in his hand. He made a comment about the latest campaign numbers and patted my shoulder in a quick, casual way. His hand was warm, and I watched Marina's eyes go wide for a second. He asked if I could stay late that evening to polish a proposal. I told him in a smooth voice that I was used to late nights and that my husband would survive. Damien gave a small smile and moved on. The whole exchange felt like a tiny show, and I liked that I had an audience. By lunch, the talk about drinks after work had started. One of the designers said we should go back to that rooftop bar near the office since the weather was still good. Marina told me that I had to come because people wanted to hear more of my husband drama, and she said it like it was a funny series they were all following. I pretended to resist a little, saying I was tired, but inside I was glad. If enough people saw Caleb as the problem, then maybe I really was not. Before leaving for the bar, I passed by Caleb's name on my phone screen and felt an odd twist. I had not answered his last text from that morning, where he had sent a picture of Mila's drawing. In the drawing, we were all holding hands under a bright sun. I had ignored it because it made my chest feel tight. Instead, I looked at the group chat with Hannah and saw that it was quiet. No new messages. Some part of me wanted to write something sharp, but I decided silence would sting more. The rooftop bar was bright and loud, with music playing just low enough that people had to lean close to talk. We took a long table by the edge, city lights spreading out below. Drinks arrived, and someone started a round of stories about relationship red flags. Marina turned to me and begged me to tell the one about my husband and the divorce text. Others nodded and smiled, waiting. I took a long sip of my drink and felt the sweet burn in my throat. I told them about being chained to my desk while my husband checked in like a worried parent. I said he could not handle that my boss valued me and that he had tried to use the word divorce to scare me. I said he even pulled Damien's wife into it like some kind of school tattletale. People laughed, some with real amusement, some with that sharp edge that means they are glad it is not them. Marina pulled out her phone and took a photo of me mid-story, head back a little, glass in hand, the city as a backdrop. She said the world needed to see this energy. I laughed and let her tag me. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Caleb. He asked if I would be home in time to read Mila a bedtime story because she had told him she wanted both of us on the couch. I stared at the message for a moment and felt a wave of irritation. I sent back that I was out with the team for networking and that he knew how important my job was. I added that he needed to stop trying to guilt me every time I had a life. After I pressed send, I showed the message to Marina and said he always chose the worst time to cling. Caleb's reply came a minute later. He wrote that he understood, that he would handle bedtime, and that Mila would be fine. There was no guilt, no anger, just that even tone. For some reason, that made me more upset than if he had written a long emotional speech. I told myself he was using calm words as a weapon, trying to make me feel like a wild child next to his steady goodness. I turned my phone face down on the wet table and grabbed my drink again. As the night went on, people took more photos and short clips. At one point, a co-worker filmed me giving a mock toast to independent women who do not let insecure men hold them back. Everyone cheered and knocked glasses, and I saw Damien at the end of the table watching with that half smile. It was not full approval, more like careful distance. Still, I told myself we looked like a powerful team and that Caleb was far away in a small life. When I finally left the bar and made my way home in a rideshare, my head buzzed, but I did not feel drunk, just full of noise. I walked into the apartment as quietly as I could. The living room was dark, only the hallway light on. On the fridge, the red circle around meeting. Personal seemed even darker in the dim light. From the study came a faint glow. I stepped in and saw Caleb at the desk again, his face lit by the laptop screen. He did not jump when I entered, just turned slightly. On the screen, I saw a spreadsheet open, rows of dates and small letters. Before I could read more, he minimized it. He said he was just catching up on some things. I looked at his browser and caught a flash of words like storage options and delivery tracking before he closed the window. Next to his laptop, his phone lit for a second with a small box that read, "File uploaded successfully." He picked it up and locked it, like it was nothing. I felt a prickle at the back of my neck, but I pushed it away. I told myself he was being petty, keeping little lists to make me feel watched, trying to build a case in his head. I said out loud that he was turning into a paranoid old man while I was still young and moving forward. He did not answer. He just gathered some papers that looked like simple bill reminders and slid them into the household folder. As I turned to leave the room, his muted phone lit up with an incoming call marked private, and he slipped on his headphones while my rooftop photo pinged into a new group chat on my own screen. The family dinner was supposed to be simple and warm. At least that was how Ruth had described it when she called. She said it would be nice for everyone to sit together, that Mila loved the restaurant with the big fish tank, and that we had all been too busy lately. I agreed because it sounded easy, and also because a part of me liked the idea of walking in looking polished and important. I wanted people to see that my life was bigger than Caleb's quiet little plans. The long table at the restaurant was already half full when we arrived. There were paper menus, crayons for the kids, and the low buzz of many voices. Ruth sat near the middle, smiling politely as she poured water. Ari waved from one end, already with a drink in her hand. A few of Caleb's cousins were there too, plus an old family friend whose name I always forgot. I walked in with my head high, Mila holding my hand, Caleb trailing slightly behind us with her backpack. As soon as we sat down, Ari leaned over and asked in a loud whisper if the drama at home had cooled off. She wanted to know if Caleb was still being, in her words, dramatic about my long hours and close work with Damien. I laughed and said he was still sensitive and that he had even tried to pull my boss's wife into our private business. Some of the people at the table looked up when they heard the words boss and wife together. I liked how their attention turned to me. The conversation rolled along with small talk about work and school and the usual things. Mila showed her drawing to her grandmother, a picture of a big building she said was my office. Ruth smiled and said my job was impressive, but I heard a note in her voice that I chose to ignore. Someone asked how late I had been staying at work. I said I often left when the cleaning staff did, because big clients expected that level of commitment. Caleb sat quietly beside Mila, cutting her food and asking if she wanted more sauce. When the food arrived, Ari tapped her glass with a fork and said she wanted a toast. She said she wanted to celebrate my recent project success and the fact that I was finally being seen, at work. Everyone looked our way, some politely, some with real interest. Ari asked me to tell them about the night on the rooftop bar, the one with my team and my jealous husband's story. I felt a small twist in my chest, but I pushed it down and smiled. I began to tell the story, using my hands to show the city lights and the long table and how the drinks kept coming. I told them about how my husband had sent me a serious message in a group chat with Hannah and had offered to help with the divorce. I said he had tried to use that word as a tool to control me. I said he had dragged my boss's wife into it to shame me, even though he knew nothing had really happened. I made my voice light and mocking. People laughed, some loudly, some just because it was easier than staying silent. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Caleb's jaw set tight. He did not speak. He kept cutting Mila's food and listening while I described him as weak and fearful. Mila looked back and forth between us, wide-eyed. I told myself she was too young to understand. I told myself the small discomfort I felt was just old habits of guilt, not a real warning. Ari pulled out her phone and pointed the camera at me. She told me to repeat the funny part, the bit about the group chat and the divorce offer. I did, with a little extra drama, acting like Caleb had collapsed on the floor and thrown a fit, even though, in reality, he had only sent one calm message. Ari laughed and said people on her social media would eat this up. She said everyone loved toxic husband stories lately. I told her to tag me, already picturing the likes. At that moment, one of Caleb's cousins asked if the story was fully true. He said it sounded serious if my husband and another man's wife were talking about divorce. He asked if maybe it was not something to joke about. I shrugged and said that in this house, if you could not laugh about it, you would cry. That was how I framed the whole thing, as me being strong and funny and him being limited. I did not look at Caleb's face because I knew it would make me feel something I did not want. Ruth cleared her throat and spoke in a low, clear tone. She said that some things should be handled between husband and wife, especially when a child was at the table. She placed a hand on Mila's shoulder and gave her a little squeeze. I said that honesty in front of children was healthy, that hiding conflict only made it worse, and that I would not lie to my daughter about who I was. Ruth did not argue with many words. She only said that respect mattered, and that children remembered the way their parents spoke about each other. The table grew a bit quieter after that. People went back to their food, but the air felt heavier. I felt annoyed that Ruth had tried to dampen my moment. I thought she was taking Caleb's side, as always. In my mind, I painted her as old-fashioned, unable to accept that a modern woman might need more than a simple, quiet man. I leaned toward Ari and whispered that I was tired of being made the villain just because I wanted more. Later, when I went to the restroom, I passed Caleb at the edge of the room. He stood near the corridor with his phone in his hand. On the screen, I saw a notification labeled follow-up at the top of a message thread before he locked it. I raised an eyebrow and asked who he was busy texting during a family dinner. He said he was just handling some things and that not everything had to be a show. I said he was being secretive and that it did not look good. He did not answer me. He slipped his phone into his pocket and walked back to the table. After dinner, as people started to stand and gather jackets, Ari showed me a short clip she had taken of my toast. In it, I was laughing, glass in hand, saying that if a man could not handle a woman with a big career, maybe he should find someone smaller. Caleb's face was visible in the background, eyes down, jaw clenched. Ari said the video was gold and that she was sending it to a group chat already full of my stories. When we stepped out into the parking lot, the night air felt colder than it should. Mila held Caleb's hand and asked quietly in a small voice if we were still a family. I felt a flash of anger at her question and said she was being silly, that families fought and joked all the time. Caleb looked at me with something like disappointment, then bent down to tell Mila in soft words that he loved her and that he would always be her dad, no matter what. I hated the way his calm steadiness made me feel shaky. On the drive home, the car was quiet. My phone buzzed with notifications as Ari's clip started to spread in our small circle. The little icons of laughing faces lit up one after another. I watched them and told myself that the crowd agreed with me, so I had to be right. Beside me, Caleb's phone screen lit up once with the word "follow up" again, before he flipped it over. As we pulled into the driveway, Ari's video pinged into a new group chat while a message titled "follow up" vibrated on Caleb's muted phone in the cup holder. 2 days after the dinner, Caleb suggested we take Mila to the park. He said she had been quiet since the restaurant and that some fresh air would be good. I almost said I was too busy, but I had no real excuse that sounded good, so I agreed. I dressed in my nicer casual clothes and told myself we would look like a normal family, just one where the mother had more going on than the father. That thought soothed me for a moment. The city park playground was busy, full of small kids shouting and climbing and running in circles. The sky was clear, and the air smelled like cut grass and snack food. Mila ran toward the swings with a happy squeal, and Caleb followed, his hands in his jacket pockets. I hung back for a minute, taking out my phone to film a short clip for my story. I made sure my hair and face were in the frame along with the bright playground behind me. I said in a light voice that even busy working mums needed time in the sun. I did not show Caleb in the frame. When I turned the camera toward Mila, she was on the swing, and Caleb was gently pushing her, not too high. Her laughter sounded real, but her eyes still looked a bit serious whenever she glanced at me. I called out that she should wave to my followers, and she lifted one hand, more shy than usual. After I stopped recording, she asked Caleb in a small voice why I always had my phone out now. I heard him answer that I liked to share moments, and that sharing could be good if it did not hurt people. His words annoyed me, even though he did not say them in a sharp way. I walked over and took the swing from him, saying I wanted a turn. Mila smiled faintly and held the chains. I pushed her a bit harder, wanting her to laugh and forget whatever was making her so serious. She did giggle, but then she suddenly asked if it was true that we were getting a divorce. The word came out clumsy in her mouth, but there was no mistake. My hands tightened on the chains. I asked her who had used that word with her. She said she had heard me say it in the restaurant, and she had heard Aunt Ari laugh about it in a video. She said a boy at school had said his parents divorced and then he had 2 houses, and she did not know if that was what was happening to us. My heart jumped, but I pushed down the fear and replaced it with anger. I told her she was worrying about grown-up jokes and that of course we were still a family. I said Daddy was just being dramatic sometimes, and that she should not listen when he made big things out of small ones. Caleb stood a little to the side and watched us, his face tight. When I finished talking, he stepped closer and said in a calm voice that none of this was a joke and that adults needed to be careful with the words they used around children. I snapped that he was the one who had thrown the word divorce into a chat and that he had started all of this. He said quietly that he had not made jokes with it, and that was the difference. Mila listened with wide eyes, and then she asked if she would have to choose who to live with. The question hung in the air like a heavy stone. Caleb knelt beside her and told her that she did not have to worry about anything right now. He said they both loved her, and that she was not the one making decisions. I felt as if he was painting me as unstable right in front of her, even though his voice stayed very soft. I told him he was scaring her by making it sound like something huge was happening. He said that something was happening whether I admitted it or not. I felt more exposed in that open playground than I had at any party. Later that afternoon, Ruth called and asked if we could stop by her house. She said Mila had left a book there on the last visit and that she wanted to see us. I did not want another lecture, but Caleb said it would mean a lot to her. Mila was still holding her stuffed rabbit and looked tired, so I agreed, mostly to avoid another quiet argument. We drove over in Caleb's car. I noticed, not for the first time, that he now always parked facing the street, easy to pull out quickly. I told myself it was nothing. Ruth's living room smelled like tea and old books. Mila went straight to the corner where there were some toys and started to build a small house with blocks. Ruth gave Caleb a long, searching look, then turned to me with a polite smile. She asked how work was going and if I was still staying late. I said yes, in a proud tone, and added that Damien trusted me with bigger tasks now. She nodded slowly, but her eyes went to Mila, then back to me. After a few minutes, Ruth asked if she could talk to me alone in the living room while Caleb helped Mila find her book in the bedroom. I followed her, arms crossed. She sat in her usual chair and gestured for me to sit on the sofa. On the low table there was a thin binder labelled Utilities that seemed oddly full. In the hallway behind her I heard the soft hum of something mechanical for a moment, then it stopped. It sounded like a shredder, though I could not be sure. Ruth spoke in a gentle voice, but every word felt heavy. She said she had seen some of the videos Ari had shared and that they hurt to watch. She said she understood that marriage was hard and that people made mistakes, but she could not ignore the way I spoke about Caleb in public. She said Mila was old enough to understand when her father was being mocked. She did not accuse me directly of cheating. She did not say Damien's name, but her eyes were clear, and I felt naked. I tried to defend myself. I said that I was under a lot of pressure, that Caleb did not support my growth, that he made everything about his feelings. I said I needed to vent somewhere or I would explode. I said it was not fair that everyone treated him as the saint when he was the one who had brought up divorce in front of another man's wife. Ruth listened, then said that a person could be hurt and still behave with dignity, and that she had only seen dignity on one side of this so far. That sentence stung more than if she had shouted. I told her she was taking his side and that she did not see what he was like at home when he went quiet and cold and kept secret little notes. I said he had started parking weird and spending time in the study like some spy. She looked at me for a long moment and then said that sometimes quiet preparation was not spying. Sometimes it was survival. I did not like the way the word survival sounded in her mouth, like I was some kind of danger. When we left, Caleb locked the door behind us and slipped a small key back into his pocket. Not the usual house key, but something newer and shinier. I wanted to ask what it opened, but I stopped myself. I told myself I did not care. Back at home, I walked past the guest room and saw the bed neatly made but clearly used, the pillow dented on one side. It hit me then that he had not slept next to me for 3 nights. I told myself that was his choice, not mine, and that he would come back if he truly wanted our marriage. That night, while I scrolled my phone on the couch, I heard a low mechanical sound down the hall again, that same soft shredder hum I had heard at Ruth's. Caleb moved from the study to the guest room with quiet steps. Mila's door stayed closed. I stared at the ceiling and told myself he was being dramatic and that anything he collected or sorted could be talked away if needed. I still believed my voice would be stronger than his files. As I put my phone down, the shredder stopped and Caleb's car keys clicked on the table, the new unfamiliar key shining under the hallway light. Caleb came home early that Friday while I paced the living room, rehearsing lines for Damien that would make me feel chosen again. He walked past me to the study, gathered his laptop, a thin stack of printed pages, and a single USB stick with today's date. I joked he looked ready to run away and join the accountants. He said he was done arguing and would handle everything properly now, for Mila's sake and his own, and that I could keep my stories if I wanted them. A phone alarm buzzed with the label paper drop as he closed the guest room door. The office tower lobby felt like any other morning until I saw Caleb standing near the security desk with Hannah beside him, both too calm for rush hour. A woman I did not know stepped forward, asked my name, and handed me a thick envelope while people slowed near the elevators. She said it was a divorce petition with temporary orders already in effect, including a custody schedule for Mila and rules for the apartment and money. Caleb said he was just protecting himself and our daughter properly now, and everyone heard him. Elevator doors closed on them as I stared at my name on the first page.